Hello, everyone.
Hi.
We're now live on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome to our first episode of our new series, Both Sides of the Story.
I'm feeling very nervous.
Me too.
Right
My
now.
heart has just started beating very fast. So hopefully you're already here because you know that we're the Squirrel Sisters. So I'm Sophie.
And I'm Gracie, and I am the younger sister, which obviously means I'm the sweeter, more innocent one.
I don't know about that. But that would also make me the older, cranky one, which definitely isn't true. I am older.
So we are going to be interviewing some of Britain's leading entrepreneurs that we are in awe of, that inspire us, and hopefully inspire you too.
So we're going to be quizzing them about the highs and the lows of their story and just really getting to the juicy bits, the tough parts, and how they kept going.
And tonight we are incredibly excited to introduce our first special guest, Wilfred Emmanuel Jones, aka the Black Farmer. So Wilfred has an incredible story. He's not afraid of pushing boundaries, and he's recently become a guardian squirrel to us. More on that later. So please feel free to leave any questions you want us to ask. And just a quick disclaimer, this interview will contain strong language
from Wilfred. So Wilfred is waiting to come on and tell his incredible story. But to start the conversation off, we're going to be putting him on the spot. We've been working with him for a while, and he is always putting us on the spot. So it's our turn to get our own back, which he said it's fine. So something that he's famously talking about at the moment is just embracing uncertainty. And that's definitely something he's pushing us to do. And we just want to know from you, Wilfred, how do you make a friend of uncertainty?
Well, first of all, could I just say, girls, what a wonderful intro that you've given me. So it goes to show that I made the right decision deciding to work with you. So thank you very much for that intro. And it's really exciting to be the first of what I think is going to be a wonderful chat that you're going to be doing with all the various people over the next couple of months. So I'll be one that will be listening, because one of the things that I've always found inspirational is listening to other people's stories. For anybody who is starting up in business, hearing other people's stories helps to make the journey much better. Okay, so to your first question, how do you make a friend of uncertainty? How do you embrace certainty? Well, one of the interesting things for me at the moment is, if you look at COVID is the great teacher of our times. Because for all of those people who thought that their life could be certain, they had their course of what they were going to do in their lives charted out. They were going to work, they were going to retire at a certain age. COVID came along and it suddenly said to everybody, well, if you think there is some certain things of certainty, cope and deal with this. And so lots of people, and we say lots of people, millions of people are now thrown up in the air, and all they have ahead of them is uncertainty. And it's at that point to make a fundamental decision. And that decision is that, are they then going to go into what I call fear mode? Are they then going to feel that the whole world has come tumbling down? Or are they going to say, although I do not know what tomorrow will bring, whatever tomorrow brings, I will be okay. I will cope with it. Now, one of the things I think is quite interesting for our times is that, you know, if you go back 100 years ago, probably less than that, 50 years ago, when people had things like religion in their lives, they had some vehicle in order where they could face uncertainty. And therefore, it was then easier to sort of deal with it. If you go to any of the developing nations, just take India, for example, the people in India are surrounded with uncertainty all the time. People live, they die, terrible accidents. That's happening far more in those developing countries than here in the West. But people, there's a vibrancy about these countries. There's a real zest for life, because actually what they absorb into their everyday is that things are not forever. That uncertainty is a vital part to being able to achieve great things. And so there are things we can learn from these countries, that in order to bring out the best, in order to have fantastic ideas, You will not be able to do that if you think you could plot the course for the future. You only can do that if you know that I'm going to jump in the deep end and not know what is going to happen and not be frightened. That is the key thing, is that it's not about jumping in the deep end, it's not being frightened. Don't think you're going to drown. Either you'll learn to swim bloody fast or somebody be around to help and rescue you. That for me is the essential thing in life. And I know that I'm rabbiting on at the moment, but let me just finish by saying one of the
got a question
but before you answer, I've got to say this bit here, because you see, one of the things that I find fascinating about human nature is that people say, "Oh God, this thing about uncertainty," you know, they're quite fearful of uncertainty. And I say, look, the most fundamental decision you'll ever make in your life is bound up in uncertainty, and that is falling in love. When you fall in love, you don't know what the hell it's going to come out at the other end. You're driven and you go with it, not knowing what the end result is. Now, some people get a bit of a whacking when, you know, they do not get the end result that they expect, but it doesn't stop us going for that search. So if you want to know how uncertainty is such a vital part of our lives, when you're in love, that is where you find it from. Okay, I can start rabbiting on now and let you girls go jump in.
Well, I know Gracie's got a really good question around that as well.
You're talking about uncertainty. So, Wilfred, you've worked with some major brands in your life, including Lloyd Grossman Sauces, Cobra Beers, Kettle Chips, Squirrel Sisters.
Yeah.
And you've done some pretty audacious things, like sponsoring the Eclipse when you work with Plymouth Gin. So that is pretty ballsy. That is, you know, you don't know what the outcome's going to be, but you do it anyway. So what we want to know is, even though you've had an incredibly tough journey,
which we also do want to hear more about your story.
There's a lot we want to see. You definitely don't suffer from imposter syndrome, and you have a hell of a lot of confidence. So where does this confidence come from?
Well, some of your listeners may not know my story. Mm-hmm. My story is very much the immigrant story. My family came over to this country in the 50s, and I was brought up in Birmingham in one of those classic inner city areas, and it was the pits. For those people who've heard my talk, they will know that I'm always talking about what a horrendous place Small Heath in Birmingham was, and probably still is. So I don't care whether I offend anybody. It's a fucking awful place, and, you know, I have no fond memories at all about the place. And so what happens is that from a very young age, I realized that I was an outsider. The color of my skin made me an outsider. The fact that all the people that I was surrounded with, you know, so I can remember where we lived. We had the Irish on one side of us, Asians on the other side of us. We all hated each other. One of the things that's quite interesting about being in society is shit heap. Everybody's all trying to get higher out of this shit heap to try and sort of get on. So being brought up in an environment like that, you realize you're an outsider. You don't belong. There are no reference points of belonging. And what tends to happen with people like that is they have a fundamental choice to make. They either desperately want to try and belong and acquire all the habits and the practices to belong, or you embrace the fact that it doesn't make any difference what you do, you ain't going to belong. And sometimes people who decide that they're not going to belong then become on the outside of society. They rebel against society. But what I realized pretty earlier on in life is that it is outsiders that see things differently. If you are not, in a sense, contaminated by making sure that you're liked by your friends and you're liked by people, there's a fantastic freedom about it. You girls, for example, look like lovely conventional girls. Now, for me, that's a bit of a burden. There's a great expectations about what you could say, how you could behave. It's a bloody burden. When it comes to something like me, there is no expectations at all. And that is the greatest freedom you could have, when people are surprised, are constantly surprised, or constantly trying to think, how do they fit you into this stereotype? Because what we need as human beings is quickly make a calculation of a person and put them in a box. Now, I spent my life always try to stop people doing that. That you cannot actually work out the type of person that I am, and that is my edge,
So
because it means.
would it be fair to say that you, from a young age, just you didn't care what people thought? You thought, I'm just going to make my own way. You know,
No, that's not true. Yeah, it's not true. From a young age.
All right.
Yeah. No, but you see, I think I have to be honest, because from a young age, what I wanted to do was fit in. If you're a young kid, and you could see why kids really do struggle, that, you know, if your mates are playing football and you're the one that isn't, it's a pretty horrid thing to have to deal with. You know, one of the things in my case is that I'm dyslexic, and you know, if you stand out a mile from the rest of your classmates who could read, they could do things that are just way outside your capacity, it does give you a real complex. And if there's any great regret that I have, is that in my younger days, I was ashamed of the fact that I didn't fit in. So the idea that from a young age, that I was this person with confidence ain't true at all. You know, I spent the early part of my life ashamed of the fact that I could hardly read and write, ashamed of the fact that I didn't sort of fit in. And so it is at that particular point I then had to make a decision, which is, do I spend the rest of my life always being ashamed of what I am, or what my ability is, or to try and push above it? And I was one of those people who was able to push above it. But, you know, I think what happens, and this is one of the reasons I like doing this talk, is that people look at me and they think, oh, there must be something exceptional and special about this person, but it isn't. I went through all the same agonies and stresses and anxieties that everybody else does. But all the difference is this: it's all about a state of mind. Is that if you could change that state of mind, it changes your world. So
how did you change your state of mind? How did you push above it?
Well, it was easy in a way, because if you're from society's shit heap,
Yeah.
there's nowhere else you could go. That that I couldn't pretend to be something that I wasn't. And I go back again to use you girls as an example. You know, it's far more difficult for people who belong. I think one of the things, you may have read my book, or some of your listeners would have read my book about being and belonging. If you belong, there is rules of belonging. There's an expectation of belonging. And if you dare to operate outside that framework, you know, your life's a bloody misery. It's hell. But if you are somebody who's an outsider anyhow, you're treated like an outsider by the host community. I then go to school and I'm dyslexic, and so the teachers think this guy is a stick of shit. Or every single thing in my life, I've been sort of cast aside as being irrelevant. And in a way, that has been a blessing, because there's been no expectation of me. It's, oh, this guy is a total waste of time. And then that has given me the freedom to think differently, because I haven't had to carry the burden of expectation and belonging.
So how would people who conventionally belong, you know, how would, I know that you talk to us behind the scenes and you're always trying to push us, you know, to think differently and push ourselves outside our comfort zone. But for people watching, you know, what would you say is the thing that you can, if you want to pursue something and live a more life, you know, how do you do that?
Okay, that's a really good question. And the first part of it is to accept and understand that people like you, who appear to be conventional, who belong, you have far more of a burden than I do. Far more of a burden. And part of anybody who wants to do their own thing is to come to that realization. If you want to be an entrepreneur, the whole idea of being an entrepreneur is that you're challenging the status quo. You're challenging the way that things are. So already, the fact that you two girls have decided, well, actually, I'm going to create a brand. I'm going to take on this particular sector. That is ballsy. So you're already part of my tribe to be thinking in that way. Because if you weren't, you'd be thinking, oh God, oh no. Oh, are you sure? You will know, girls, when you started your business, you have all these bloody fearmongers who spend half of their time trying to tell you of all the pitfalls, all the dangers, why you can't do it, how you should do it. You know, but there's, you know, you've been going in business for quite a while, but you push through, you push through. So that tells you that you're not somebody who belongs. You're somebody who's desperately trying to be. That is your struggle. I've never had that struggle of casting aside all those who are trying to drag me back to belong. You're dragging forward to be and having to push the fuck off, get away. I'm trying to go forward. And they're trying to pull you back to be part of their tribe, part of their community. That is what you need to sort of realize if you're from what I would call conventional backgrounds. You're constantly having to drive outside what was in your day and your background would have been seen as comforting and secure. And to be an entrepreneur, it ain't. It's a bloody burden. And that's what you've got to try and get rid of. So I know your mom and dad sitting there watching this goddamn program. There's all this
watching.
Sending you to all great schools and things like that. And God, they think, Jesus Christ, we burdened our children. But, you know, my children are very, very privileged and they've gone to, you know, great schools. And that's what we do as parents. We try and give our children the best. But the greatest gift you could give your child is a sense that they could do anything, depending, whatever life throws at them, anything. And therefore, part of that is that they have to have the mentality of an individual. They need to see that in order to achieve anything in life, you have to be able to be. You've got to say to the crowd, I'm sorry, you're all wrong and I'm right. Now, you girls know I do a hell of a lot of that sort of thing, but that's fundamentally what it comes down to.
Yeah. I definitely think like our parents have, although, you know, we kind of belong and it's all quite conventional, we've always had that, they've always believed that we can, you know, if we love, for example, playing the saxophone, we can be the best. And
You've never told me that you could play the saxophone. Where the hell is a saxophone? Where is the saxophone? My God! I didn't know that you like playing the saxophone.
Next month. But yeah.
Now, hold on. You're trying to tell me you could play the saxophone?
Well, I used to be able to. I would.
Whoa! Don't give me this business about used to. You could play the saxophone. I'm telling you what. I tell you what, listeners. Viewers, that's what she's got to do in the next show. She's got to sort of introduce the program playing the saxophone.
I'm already out of my comfort zone.
That's what it says. Push it. Actually, so we're going to start a petition. We want Sophie to play the intro the program with a saxophone.
Yes. But what I was going to say is
that yes.
away from that is that you know, I think people believe that to be an entrepreneur, you have to kind of be born to be doing this, to sell like sweets for double the price in the playground. And I know you said you don't believe that that's the case. You're not kind of born something, or you create your destiny essentially. And I think things that we've done in our lives aren't necessarily, you know, although we did sell lizard food as children, but you know, we never thought we'd own our own business and run our own business. And I think in a sense it was naivety, but it really came down to the passion we had in our products and the difference we felt we could make. So I know that our viewers would really love to hear a bit more about your story and how you came to own your own farm and realize that was your dream, and how you got there really from, as you said, living in the gutter.
Yeah. But I tell you what, there, you see, what's really interesting is that some people believe that ability is something that you're born with. And I think that's, again, one of the big issues that we have within our society. And the whole system of education is geared towards some innate ability, like IQ tests. So, you know, you've got a certain IQ from birth, and that's it. Now, we live in a society, and in terms of how we recruit, how we praise people, is that it's about people having what I call a fixed mindset. Now, a fixed mindset means that you operate within a certain parameters, and outside that, it's a bit like if somebody is trained to be a doctor, that is what they're trained to do. They can't operate outside those sort of boundaries. And what I'm a great advocate of is the growth mindset. And the growth mindset is all about, well, you don't need to have any knowledge or any training in something. It's something that you could acquire. And I'm a great, great believer is that you can acquire anything, but you need to have the mindset. So a lot of people, and it's things that you girls will probably know about me that I find bloody frustrating. if you ask somebody to do something, and go, oh God, no, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I do that. Automatically, it's like a stop. That does my goddamn head in. Because what I want to hear, say that again?
That might explain why we round you up.
Yes, that's it. Don't ever say to me, I can't do this, or this is impossible. I hate it, because nothing is impossible and anybody could do something. So, well, I do not know what it is, but I shall go and find out. That is just a mindset. So that's why all the fantasies that people sort of throw at people about, well, they had an entrepreneurial edge when they're in the playground and all that. That's a nonsense. It's about all somebody needs to say to themselves. If somebody asks them to do something and they do not know how to do it, they do not know how to do it. What they say, okay, I'll come back to you, give me an hour, and I'll come back and tell you how to do it. That's all they'll say. And then they'll go, they'll do all the research, they'll ring the right people. They will quickly find out how something is done. That growth mindset means that you never say no. Never, ever say no. And too many people, the moment they're presented with something outside of their comfort zone, their automatic reaction is no. I don't know how to do this, or God save me. And you know me, I'm pushing you and pushing you and pushing you to say, do not even come to me with the word sort of no. So that's what I think is important. Was there another part of the question, or was I just wittering on too long then?
Well, actually, we asked about your story.
Yeah, so you were saying, obviously, you were dyslexic. So what did you do? Dyslexic man, you kind of grew up in poverty. What did you do next?
So basically, yeah. So one of the things I talk about a lot when I go around the country telling people my story is that when I was younger, so I'm from a family of 11. I've got 9 brothers and sisters, and we're very, very poor. And one of the ways of supplementing the family income was that my father had an allotment, and it was my job as the eldest boy to look after this allotment. And this allotment really became my oasis away from my misery. And one of the things that I did very early on, about the age of 11, is I made myself a promise that one day I would buy my own farm. Now, one of the things I say to people all of the time is this: you have to have the audacity to dream. One of the burdens, again, about being English is that people don't like the idea of somebody being boastful, someone trying to rise above their station. The idea that I have a dream, the idea that actually I might be in society's gutter, but I'm going to be the president. People look at you in this country and think, this guy's nuts, basically, because he doesn't have the class, the background, the education. How dare he? In a sense, there's some sort of resentment that people have the audacity to think and believe that. You know, because for America, that is very much an American ideal, that it doesn't matter where you come from in society, you could actually become anything. And I think there's a lot of, I would like to see that attitude more in this country. And I think COVID might present that attitude, because a lot of people would have been disappointed and let down by the companies and the institutions and the establishments that they put their trust in for decades, only to find out when they needed them most, they weren't there. So it might change people's attitude to think, actually, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to have the audacity to think that I could be better than these people. I'm going to have the audacity to think that I could be whatever I want to do. So that was the thing that drove me through achieving everything. It took me 30 years to do it, but having the audacity to think that even though I'm a guy from the gutter, that one day I would like to own my own farm. And therefore, everything that I subsequently did is to get in a position to buy that farm. And the thing about...
Sorry, can I butt in there? Because you said it took you 30 years to achieve your dream. And I think a lot of people think, especially nowadays, you know, it's quick fixes, it's overnight success. So that's actually really interesting to hear that it took you 30 years to achieve that. And I think a lot of people, you know, might give up by that point, you know, or just rush something. So that's, really.
Yes, it does. And also running my business. Now, the Black Farmer brand, this brand has been going for 15 years. Now, for most, the reality is that there's more people out there who don't know about it than know about it. What I think there's, I was reading a book to say that it takes between 50 and 20 years for a brand to suddenly be discovered by everybody. Yeah. And I think if somebody's starting up in business, what they're all looking for is they're looking for overnight success. And again, it's made worse by all these sort of headlines you read in the business papers about this company has £1 million turnover and X billion. So everybody say, oh shit, I've got to sort of catch up with that. But a lot of companies come and go and they burn out. And I think that business and life is a marathon, is that you've got to get your head down and you say, right, I'm in this for the long game. And for somebody like me, it's always been easy because I haven't had another option. No one is going to employ me. I'm a fucking pain in the ass. No one, even though I worked somewhere in like the BBC, and as at the BBC, I travel the world making films for the BBC, and I was there for about 15 years at the BBC. But the only way I survived in an environment like that is I had protectors. All the other, the normal people hated my guts. This fucking arrogant black bastard, fucking yakking on, and my life was a misery if I did not have these guardian angels at the BBC that used to say, look, I know he's a bit difficult, but he's a good filmmaker. He does all this sort of stuff. So that's why one of the things I'm always advocating in life is that you need guardian angels. You need people who are going to protect you, because mediocrity is after you all the time. They want to drag you down. They want you to be like them, because by being like them, it then justifies their life, really.
Actually, speaking of guardian angels, we were going to save this question to the end, but as it's come up, we're going to ask and put you on the spot. So, like you said, you have, on your journey, found a lot of guardian angels that have given you that break. And with us, and without trying to make your head really big or be too cheesy, we feel that you are our guardian angel when it comes to our business. And we were looking for years for someone to help us grow the business to the next level, and it's taken 5 years to find you, and you gave us that chance. So we want to put you on the spot and find out what it is about Squirrel Sisters. Why did you give Squirrel Sisters that chance?
Okay, well, a lot of people don't know this, but one of my great fetishes are sort of strong women. Strong, independent, but they have a vulnerable edge to them women. That, if you like that, any of your listeners out there who are like that and they want me to sort of invest in their hatchery, they stand a much greater chance than anybody else, because it is my particular fetish. And so, for example, to give you an idea about that, is my favorite film of all time is Gone with the Wind. So much so that I named my daughter Scarlett. And that Scarlett O'Hara in that film is my ideal woman, who is that whatever life throws at them, they will do what they can to overcome. And it's a film of absolute endurance and overcoming, and that, and being able to be feminine and having to go through all the angst of what women have to go through is what I admire. So there's U2, believe it or not, that was a quality that I liked, is that it's very easy in this male-dominated world to be intimidated. And especially if you come across as nice, is to be intimidated. But everything about Sophie and Gracie, listeners, she may come across as all very sweet and nice and delicate, but behind both of them, there's a core, there is a backbone that, she will hold her sort of line. And so that is quite admirable. So that's the why. So
that's really nice. Because the first few years, we just spent so many meetings where we would come out just feeling deflated, because we just felt like we were being made to feel like silly little girls. And I think that in a way, that spurred us on to think, no, we're not going to be treated like that. That's not us. We do have, a reason to be doing this, and we really believe that we can make it work. So yeah, I suppose it kind of drove us forward, but we're glad that it's finally come across to you.
So what I'm hoping for, girls, is that you're not the sort of girls that would go around and tell somebody, actually, don't fucking talk to me like that. Don't actually, that's the sort of stuff.
It depends who it is.
How many glasses of wine.
Yeah.
Well, what I would like is to see far more of, standing up for yourselves, and don't, it takes a lot of courage to do what you are doing. It takes a massive amount of courage to put yourself on the line. So don't let anybody try and take that away from you and put you down. And that's the thing that people who are trying to put you down need to be reminded of, because, they may think that they've got a job. They may think that there's somebody paying that, but everything that you do, you're doing it by yourselves, and that takes courage.
Yeah.
And therefore, don't wait for people to tell you've got courage. You go and tell them. That's the other thing about the bloody English. They
Well,
want to be
you're
discovered.
Pardon? You're definitely training us to get our confidence up with that.
Yeah, well, just go and tell people. Don't wait to be told. Tell them.
Well, everyone, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
But actually, on the subject of guardian angels, we had a question from Robin Bristol ahead of this interview. A really lovely question. How do you find your guardian angel? I mean, I know with you, when we came across you because of a podcast we heard you on, and then we got in touch and it went from there, really. It took a while before we started working together. But
Anyway, I'll tell you how you find your guardian angels. And again, most people have an idea of what they want to do, but they keep it secret. They keep it quiet. They don't want to go and tell people, just in case people might be a bit sort of, might put it down, might slag it off. So people, and again, it's a very English thing. They don't want to go and boast about it, tell people about it. But you ain't going to find your guardian angel unless you're prepared to go and talk about it, tell people about it. And the more you talk and tell people about things, it will then start, oh, talk to my friend so-and-so, or talk to my so-and-so. That the guardian angel will find you. But they're not going to find you unless you're prepared to go out and shout about it and talk about it. So that's how you find it. They've always found me. So I'll give you my the story of how I found my first guardian angel. Was that when I was about in my 20s, having sort of worked as a chef, and I wanted to get into television, and I have absolutely no qualifications to my name at all. Most people in television in those days, and probably still is the case today, are Oxbridge types. And I decided I wanted to get in. I wrote to everybody in TV. Nobody would answer my emails. Nobody would take my calls. So what I decided to do is that I would then go and help the security guard lift the bloody barriers up and down every day, just so I could get near the building. Then that meant I then met the cleaners, and the cleaners said, come and help them clean the offices. And then I met this guy, his name is Jock Gallagher. And so you can imagine me, a young guy, very enthusiastic, saying, look, I want to get into television and all this sort of stuff. So he told me to come into his office. And he said, look, you're not the sort of person that we employ in television because you don't have the qualifications, you don't have the education, you've got a bit of an attitude. But he said this, he said, look, I'm going to give you a job as a general runner for 3 months and seeing what happens. Now, if he had never done that, I would never, ever have started a long career in television, because my CV would never have got through bloody human resources, bloody human resources that shift out talent. It's about actually trying to find people who mold into sort of slots. And so it was him, and subsequently all through my career, because I'm an anomaly, somebody took a chance with an anomaly, because if it was left down to the conventional way of recruiting, I would have just been in the dustbin. And so those people who have a sort of disadvantage, whether that's your color, whether that's your gender, whether that's your education, we need these people who are going to give us a break, because we would never get through the processes. And that's why guardian angels are very, very important to people like us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually something you touched on and something we wanted to talk to you about was just for us to acknowledge the challenges that you have faced as a Black man and as an entrepreneur, but also particularly in the food industry. One of the podcasts the first podcast we heard you talk on, you spoke about congratulating the buyer at Selfridges because you knew the struggles and the hurdles he would have had to go through. And you just touched on it there, but we'd really like you to just expand on it a bit more and just make people aware really of, and also, sorry, and one more thing. If you're happy to talk about it, I also it would be great if you talk a little bit about your plans around Black History Month in October, if they're not secret.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So yes, the thing that being in the food industry, or most of the places that I have ended up in, you don't see people of color. You just don't. And so when I see a person of color, even today, in somewhere like Selfridges or Waitrose, or any environment where it's mainly white people, it's a shocker. You think, shit, what is he doing here? Because I know him or her, I know for that person to have got into that that level, there's got to be something pretty special about them, because it's a hard road. It is a real hard road. Now, it's not because people are overtly sort of racist. I don't think people are. Is that what people do is that people surround themselves with things that are familiar. And therefore, if you're of color and therefore you're not familiar to the people that are recruiting, you're not going to get through. And that is one of the challenges that we have in our society, to try and bring about some sort of equality. And so in the food industry, the food industry is one of those industries where it has not been scrutinized. And therefore, the media is very good at looking at business and looking at what's happening in various industries. But when it comes to the food industry, there's a lot that needs to be challenged. And when I say the food industry, I'm talking about manufacturing, because one of the things that they learnt during the civil rights movement in the 60s is the power of the black pound, the power of the money that was spent. So if the buses weren't going to allow black people to sit where they like on the buses, well, why use those buses? And so my challenge to all the supermarkets is, look, you've got black people spending their money with you. Where is your representation on senior level? Because the moment you start talking about diversity, the human resources are very clever in giving you all the statistics, and they've been really good at just actually piling rubbish on, and all the things the words that I always get nervous about. So we're considering this, we're writing reports about this. That means you're doing fuck all, basically. So they'll all sort of hide behind statistics. But when you then look at their senior level in their business, it's shameful. It is really, really shameful, even today. And so what I feel is that my responsibility as a black guy who's managed to break through, I have a responsibility. And there are a couple of things that I'm quite passionate about. One is dyslexia, because I know how many people are disadvantaged in our society because people don't realize that actually dyslexia is a gift. So I'm really passionate about them, constantly fight to give people with dyslexia big opportunities. And then the one is to challenge these companies to do more about diversity. And the other thing that people do when you talk about diversity, they'll quickly say, oh yeah, and we're doing this for women, because, not to slag you women off, but women have done quite well out of the diversity agenda. They think we better do something. So, all right, we'll get a few women in. And then the next level, then we'll get a few Asians in. And then right at the bottom is blacks. And so the whole Black Lives Matter has brought to the fore that when we're actually talking about diversity representations, the ones on the floor are people who are black. And so therefore we want to try and do something about bringing a bit more equality in that sort of area. So one of the things that I have been doing is that I've thought, right, this is my opportunity to do something really big with Black History Month in October. And that I decided that I'm going to go for what I call my Bob Geldof moment. I'm going to do what Bob Geldof did with Live Aid, is I'm going to go to every one of these senior chief execs at every one of the big supermarkets and say, right, every year in October, we're all meant to be celebrating Black History Month. And those of your listeners who probably don't know much about this, Black History Month is about celebrating Black involvement in British history. And it goes to show how little information is out there about Black involvement in British history. Because even I'm surprised to find out the roles that Black people have had in our society. The more that I discover, the more I think, my God, how comes we didn't know all about this? So there's a long way to go in terms of getting people to understand that Black involvement in British society goes way back, and there's been some phenomenal involvements. So what I decided to do is to write to these chief execs and said, right, I want to have two products, which is celebrating two people, prominent Black people in our history. And then the money from those products go directly to help Black charities that are there to educate people more about Black involvement in the UK. Now, it's been an interesting experience, you know, going to the top and saying, look, you're prepared to spend a lot of money on Easter, at Christmas, you know, what is that? Even Black Friday, you know, when you're doing all of that. Yeah, no, so I said, so for the month of October, if we could have something where, you know, on your gondola ends, you're doing something for the greater good. And so Sainsbury's was the first to jump and say, yeah, that's a really good idea, and been really behind it. Then came Co-op, they've been fantastic. Tesco's have been behind it, Budgings, Ocado, even the great Marks and Spencers have been behind it. And so the two people who I'm still trying to get on board, and it's Waitrose and Iceland. And
I was wondering if you were going to call them out, actually.
Yeah.
I am going to call them out because, you know, I think that it would be for them to tell their customers, why aren't they behind something like this when every other supermarket is? And this is an opportunity for them to demonstrate things to the greater good. And it doesn't feel comfortable because they represent middle-class white Britain. And I'm sure middle-class white Britain would want to be involved in something like that. So I'm still waiting to hear from them. But, you know, apart from those two, to give all, you know, Lidl is involved, Aldi is involved. Aldi is going to give all of their money to these charities. So that to me is good. That is demonstrating that actually people see that this thing is important and they're trying to bring about a change. So, you know, when people talk to us about an entrepreneurialism and why do we do the things that we do, you know, if I could do a little bit to bring about a change and create more of awareness, that is something worth dying for. I don't work to be rich and have loads of money. I do things to try and bring about change. That's what excites me. That is what makes it worth getting up in the day. It's not about making shed loads of money. It's about bringing about change.
That's amazing.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, yeah, hallelujah. And so actually this leads on quite nicely to a question we've had from Helen in Sevenoaks. So she says, the Black Farmer is a controversial brand name. Have you ever had any backlash or been able to use it to your advantage? Which is kind of, yeah.
So the reality is this, so why did I call my brand the Black Farmer?
Yeah.
Now, when I bought my farm after all those years of struggle, so my farm's down in the southwest. It's near Launceston, or Lanston. They keep telling me I should pronounce it, near Lanston, and it's on the Devon-Cornwall border. And when I was down there, I thought, one of the things I noticed is this big gap between urban and rural Britain. It's like living in two foreign lands. They don't really understand each other. So again, an outsider seeing an opportunity. So I thought, actually, there's an opportunity here to create a brand will not only appeal to urban Britain, but also it might help to bridge that gap between urban and rural. So I found a manufacturer who could help me develop a product. I thought I didn't want to be seen as an ethnic brand. I wanted to be seen as an absolute mainstream brand. And then it was, well, what the hell am I going to call this brand? And I took ages trying to come up with a very, interesting brand name. And then one day it came to me. All of my next door neighbors used to call me the Black Farmer. And I thought, well, shit, that's a pretty good brand name. Not only is it a really good brand name, no one else out there could nick the idea. Not only could no one else nick the idea, it has an edge to it. Because people are not too sure about whether it's politically correct or not, whether it's the right thing to say. There are certain parts of Britain still today, people are uncomfortable using the word black. They would refer to you as coloured rather than black because they think there's all this, the thing about the correct language to use when you're referring to people of colour in the UK is still a delicacy. And so what I decided to do, I'm going to call myself the Black Farmer, but before I pressed the button on it, I thought I'm going to research this. And I put it out to research, and all the research came back and said, do not call it the Black Farmer because it will offend people. And so there's a lesson in this, and about all the people who believe in research and their whole lives are geared based on what the research says. This is the lesson. Research will tell you what people thought yesterday. Research will tell you what people think today, but it will not tell you what people think in the future. And that's where you need to have vision, your own courage, if you want to bring about change. So I knew when I launched the Black Farmer brand that some people might find it offensive. In fact, this is a true story. When I launched my brand, within the first couple of years, the brand was reported to, then it was called the Department of Racial Equality, or Commission of Racial Equality, about actually being racist towards white people. And what would happen is this.
Gosh.
I'll tell you what happened was this, was that I was doing bacon, and in the bacon, as our strap line, so it was, you can imagine, Black Farmer bacon, and the strap line was no white bits. And somebody thought that no white bits meant that I was referring to people. This is how fucking sensitive and crazy some people are, thinking that I'm somehow referring to white people. And so I had to write back to this guy and say, look, what I mean by that is, you know, when you cook bacon, and pretty cheap bacon, and when you're frying, you get all this slimy white.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, that's what it was, you know.
That's really good.
But again, because this nervousness about language, some people said, well, you know, you should call it the Afro-Caribbean farmer. You said, it doesn't have a ring to it. So if you're fearful of the consensus, that's the greatest trap that people have. You're fearful of the consensus. If you're fearful of mediocrity, you're never going to take a bold move by that. You're worried about what people are going to think. Now, I've always known, and the Black Farmer brand is about it. Some people are going to have an opinion about it that I don't care. I think I'm right, and I think they're wrong. That's the attitude you've got to do. And in time, people will come along with you. It's the difficult bit, is stepping outside the comfort zone of belonging to the masses. The moment you say, no, this is the direction I'm going, that's when you're on your own. And that's what entrepreneurialism is all about.
And I think the Black Farmer is just such a memorable name. I remember when I first saw it on the shelves, and I was gluten-free at the time, and so that was the big pull, and I was thinking, can you say that? Obviously you can, it's on the shelf, but I just didn't forget it because it was such a memorable name, and obviously the best sausages.
But one of the things I used to find, and it goes to show how revolutionary it is in a way, because when I used to go around the country doing shows, and people would, you know, because we, as you know, it's a fantastic product. We do fantastic products, and our sausage, we're known for our sausages, and it's sort of gluten-free. But I can remember, you know, going to all these shows around the country with the Blue Rinse Brigade, and overhearing conversations with, you know, ladies who lunch with talking to each other. And I can remember one conversation, a lady on the mobile phone saying, "Where are you, Gladys?" "Oh, I'm by the Black Farmer." "Oh, you can't say that."
That's hilarious.
But you see what I mean? He's got it there. And then, you know, I tell, come on, ladies, come and meet the old Black Farmer. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Giggle, giggle.
I bet they love that.
Those are wonderful days. I used to love going around and flirting with all these ladies and giving them permission to use the word black, the Black Farmer. But, you know, the confusion about using that name is something that I haven't worried about.
No, and it's brilliant.
Yeah. So, Wilfred, we're coming to the end of our interview. We've got 50 minutes left, but we still have a few things we want to fit in. So we want to put you on the spot. We've got 2 questions that we both want to ask, and your answer has to be quick.
Yeah.
And so, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
The best piece of advice I've ever been given is never to chase money, chase success. The thing that most people do in life is that they think about how much money they're transactional driven. They're all about the money. The amount of bloody conversations that I hate. It costs too much. How much is it going to cost? If you start off on that basis, you're missing out on opportunity. Don't chase money, chase success. So many people are driven about the cost of something.
Yeah, that's definitely a conversation that we had at the beginning with you, isn't it?
Yeah, everybody, it's seriously, because the moment you do that, you've just trapped yourself into a way of thinking, what you can do. Just do not, money is a construct. It's not real. It's not real.
Having that kind of attitude is actually visualizing what you want rather than the end goal of what you're going to sell your business for, how much money you get every month. And that's what's really important.
And then also money's there to create fear. The way you control people is through fear. And, the fear of not having money. Most people, why don't they do what they want to do? They're fearful of, how am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to do this? How am I going to feed the kids? The amount of bloody conversations that I have about the fear of what would life be like without any money. The reality is that whatever life presents to you, you're not the sort of person that's going to be on the streets not being able to cope. If people could just get that into their heads, they may not know how they're going to cope. All they need to know is that whatever comes along, they will cope. Do you sort of mean? Whereas a lot of people want to think, well, I need to know before I then make the leap. Well, you don't know, but what comes along, you'll be able to cope with what comes along. That's the attitude to have. Do not chase money, chase success.
Brilliant, great answer. So I've got a question to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
What is the biggest mistake you've ever made?
I've made lots and lots of mistakes. And what I am is very proud of all the mistakes. So to say one, it's not really fair because I've made tons of them. And this is what I think is that the only way to measure whether you are living your life to the full is by the number of mistakes that you've made. A lot of people think that life is about not making mistakes. They are totally wrong, because what that actually means is they're not living their life to a max. They're living life restricted because they're terrified of making a mistake. So I say to people, and any of the people listening to this now, if you cannot point to a mistake you made 6 months ago, you are not living life to a full. It means you're slumming it. That the way to measure you are living life to a maximum is that you could go back and say, the badge of honor for this year was this mistake and that mistake and that mistake. So I've made tons of them. And so one that sort of stands out for me is like, normally when I'm not here in my pajamas and my sort of casual wear, that I'm a bit of a dandy. And I like...
Yeah, we wanted your jacket, your 800 flamingo jacket.
No, but I thought I'm going to start a new fashion, actually, because we've got to start up, with everybody now working from home. There's got to be what I call Zoom wear, where everybody sort of goes around and shows off their sort of Zoom wear. So I'm going to start off the trend by showing people my sort of pajama.
They're very snazzy.
Yeah. Well, exactly. So I'm still trying to be a bit of a dandy, even with my Zoom wear. But yes, so what I did is that I launched a Black Farmer clothing range. And which was in the style that I absolutely liked. Now, this is what's interesting. All the men loved it, but the great lesson that I learned in life is this: the men would love it. It'd be wonderful. They would then turn to their wives and their girlfriends and say, "What do you think, darling?" And if the wives said, "Nah, didn't like it," they wouldn't buy it. You fucking women are the ones who are responsible for men going around looking like shit, because there's something about women that don't like their men to go around looking glamorous, looking like real dandies.
Ian dresses pretty well.
Well, I don't know, but it's seriously, it was the biggest lesson that I learned, is that women dictate what their men wear. So you women are lucky to be able to go out and flamenco, be extravagant in what you wear. But men have to be a bit more conservative. So it's very few men who are prepared to be flamboyant, to go out and do their thing. So it didn't work for that reason.
Most expensive mistake, maybe.
Pardon?
Maybe your most expensive mistake, or?
Yes. What I'm about to do is that I'm about to launch the Black Farmer farm shop online.
Okay, I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Right. And, now I don't know whether that's going to work or not. I haven't got a clue. I think it might do, but if it doesn't, that will be an expensive mistake. It'll be a big learning. And I think the thing about me is that I've been in business long enough to know that whatever happens is that I will be all right. Is that, I'll find something else will, get me motivated or sort of direct me somewhere else. So what you can't ever do, and all the great entrepreneurs, you don't think about the money. What I tend to do is think about the idea, go for everything, and it's not until we're almost there that I then think about the financial side of it. And what a lot of people do, especially those left-brainers, they start from the financial, how much it's going to cost, work all that first of all. Now, that restricts creativity. what, if you think about, the Walt Disneys of this world, or the Steve Jobs of this world, you don't start off from what the price is. You start off from wanting to change the world, wanting to do something different. There's a purpose about it rather than what it's going to cost. So that's why the people who are good number twos are the money people. They're rubbish at being number ones because they're always conscious about the cost of things, and you can't dream, you can't challenge, you can't explore if you're restricted by that. So, I think that that's the way that I sort of operate. So I don't think about whether it's expensive or not. I mean, I'd much rather die a pauper, but have lived a life that has, done wonderful things rather than. And this is an interesting story. My brother died about a year ago. He died. He was in his 50s. And he was a sort of guy that worked. He had a plan. And his plan was, I was going to work. I was going to have my pension. I was then going to buy a place in Spain and then, get my pension and live off my pension for the rest of my life. That was his plan. And his plan is a conventional plan of a lot of people. He didn't live to see it. So, even though when he was quite ill, I was trying to convince him to spend his bloody money enjoying his life. It was so ingrained in him that, you've always got to save for a future, even though a future did not exist. It's about how you get that sort of balance right, how you don't let money constrain the things that you could do in life, because I'm a great believer it's a construct.
Yeah. Well, that is a really.
And the other thing I do is this: is that the one thing I would say is this, what I probably didn't get a chance to say, is that most people are terrified of the money men. They will never ever take on, like, me and my bankers, we have fights because I'm not scared of them. And so what bankers try and do, the money men try and intimidate you. That's fundamentally what money is all about. It's about how do you instill fear. And, you talk to any of my bankers and they tell you, actually, Wilfred's a bastard. And I am, because I say, I'm not frightened of you. What's the best you could do? This is the situation. I'm not going around being irresponsible, but I'm not going to take my instructions or what I wanted from you because you're just a banker. I'm the person that's making a difference. So all you've got to do is make sure that I'm doing the right thing, but don't you tell me what I should be wanting to do. And another example of that is that in the early days when I started,
we are going to have to wrap up in a minute. Okay, so
no, but I'm going to tell you this one bit. We should have done this as a 2-hour slot. When in the early days, when you're desperate for money, absolutely desperate, and that's when these bastard fearmongers really come and they want to chuck money at you. And I can remember when I nearly got investors into the business. And it was only, when I look back at it, I was going to give away something like 30% of my business for next to nothing. And I was talking to them about all the ideas that I wanted to do. And they went, no. When we're involved, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I just thought, actually, that was a mistake. So I pulled out of the deal because I just thought I'll be basically held back from doing everything that I wanted to do. And that's some 15 years ago. So what I've done, and even to this day, I don't have any investors in my business. I own it. Everything is mortgaged up to the hilt so I could have independent control, because then I could take it into the direction that I want rather than what the money men think, because all they want is their return. That's all they care about. Yeah. They don't want to change the world. They just want their return. I want to change the world.
Yeah, love that. Okay, Wilfred, something we both love, particularly me, is a good quote.
Yeah, she does. If you see her Instagram, that's all great.
Yeah. So we want to finish this interview off by finding out what is your favourite quote ever and why.
Oh shit, that is a real random question. I do like my quotes, really.
You said we could put you on the spot.
Yeah.
One of my I don't know if it's a quote, but one of my big things, it's about the power of vulnerability. Mm-hmm. We spend our lives thinking we need to hide our vulnerability, but it took me a long time to learn that that is the most powerful thing that we have, if we have the ability to express our vulnerability, because the only way you get through to courage is being vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So when we look at people that we admire for their courage, but in order to get to that place of courage, they've had to make themselves vulnerable. whether that's in business, whether that is in love, with any aspect of your life, to move forward, you have to be prepared to make yourself vulnerable. So everything we've been taught about hiding your vulnerability, protecting it, that's restricting growth. So that's the best that I could do there.
Well, I think that's a great quote, or great inspirational way to end this interview. And I think we sufficiently put you on the spot. So thank you so much for being our first guest. You've been brilliant, and not that you have much choice in being our first guest.
Thank you.
We really hope that everyone who's watching it at home enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching along with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, and we hope to see you back here again next month, where we have special guest Holly Tucker, which is actually, she's the reason we met Wilfred in the first place. So she is the founder of Not on the High Street, Holly & Co, and she also has an incredible podcast which is called Conversations of Inspiration. Go and listen, it's brilliant.
And Wilfred's got an episode on there, which is fantastic. So now we're going to end with an awkward Zoom wave. So Wilfred, we want you to join in this too. So bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.